coming tonight and for our presenters as well. My name is Chris Lindberg. I work for Bellevue School District. I'm down at the central office and do a lot with student data and state testing. So thank you all for coming through snow and ice and all that good stuff. So this is private colleges. We have a variety of representatives here, so it should be a really great session. I have some questions that were prepared for us that we're going to sort of focus on, and then we'll try and leave time toward the end for any additional questions that you would like to ask our panelists. So we'll go ahead and get started. And I think first, if you can just introduce yourself and give, a quick elevator speech on your admissions process for your institution.
I'm Furtado from Colleges That Change Lives, and I represent 45 schools in 26 states, so I will not be doing admission processes. No offense meant. I was listening to the question, but I am happy to fill in in a more general way about the admission search from my 20 plus years, going on actually more than 25, so we'll stop talking now.
Yeah, I am Luke Davis with Seattle Pacific University. Some of you may know Kristen Quackenbush. I am obviously not Kristen Quackenbush. She's out with the fever. She normally covers the area up here. For SPU, super brief, we look at SAT or ACT scores, the Common App essays. We do also look at involvement or extenuating circumstances when you write out those essays. Often they can be about things that have happened in the high school process, but we look pretty holistically at all those together.
Hey everybody, I'm Miles. I'm at the University of Puget Sound. Similarly, I am not your King County rep. I'm just filling in tonight. Puget Sound, similarly, of course, looking at holistic application review process, every component of the application considered. It's just about everyone here tonight will tell you. Every component we have also on the Common App, no additional supplemental information there, and 3 separate application types. So that's something we'll talk about later on.
Hi everyone, I'm Hikaru Yamaguchi from Gonzaga University in Spokane, Washington. A Jesuit Catholic school, about 4.5 hours away from here if you decide to drive. We do a holistic review. We are on the Common Application. Something new, especially for you juniors in the classroom, Gonzaga is moving towards a 1 application deadline, which is different than what we have been doing in the past. It'll be a December 1st deadline. More information to come. More and more as we do a holistic review process, we're starting to dig in deeper into what types of classes students are taking throughout their time in high school, and how does that relate to the major that they're interested in studying.
Hi everyone, my name is Grace, and I'm with Pacific Lutheran University down in Tacoma. I am the admission counselor for the Bellevue School District, so I work with all the schools in this area. And an easy way to kind of remember what our application process looks like is using the acronym TREAT. So we look at high school transcript, 1-letter recommendation, essay, application, also on the Common App, and or test scores. And we're a test optional university, so that last T might or might not apply. And we are a rolling admission school, so we're always accepting applications throughout the year.
Hi everyone, my name is Katie O'Brien. I'm the Director of Undergraduate Admissions at Seattle University. I think proximity-wise, maybe the closest as the crow flies from where we're sitting right now. So right in the heart of kind of the Capitol Hill area in Seattle. And very similar kind of holistic admissions processes, I think we all note. And first and foremost, academics are going to be the most important thing, and I think most of us would say that because that is ultimately, we want students who are going to be successful in our rigorous classes. But at the same time, we're looking for students who are going to be a good fit for our community. And so that's where some of those other components come in of where do you invest your time, what are you interested in, and just kind of being authentic in that experience.
Hi everybody, I'm Andrea Frangi. I am the Regional Director of Admission for the George Washington University. You might think I came from far away, but I actually live on Beacon Hill, so super close. I work with students from this area, Oregon, California, and some other Western states. Similarly, Common Application School, we are also test optional, but I think one of the things that makes us a little bit unique is when you're applying to GW, you're going to indicate which school you are interested in, and we are going to consider you directly for that school. So when we're looking at strength of application, in many cases we're also going to be looking at preparedness for a particular area of interest.
And did you mention where your school is located?
Sorry, we're located in Washington, D.C., 4 blocks away from the White House.
So we have Washington, 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 and the other Washington. Great. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the academic strength on a student's transcript, as far as how important are the courses there. What about AP coursework versus core classes? Any specific AP course things that you look at? Just throw it open, whoever wants to comment.
I'll jump in on this one, I guess. Well, first of all, mostly because I mentioned that academics are going to be first and foremost what schools are looking at. It's not ethical for us to admit a student who ultimately won't be able to get a degree from Seattle U. So that's where that academic component comes in. However, when we're looking for appropriate challenge. And I think this is something, it doesn't do you a whole lot of good to take on all these AP classes if you're not going to find success in those classes. So if you're someone who's really interested in a STEM field, where you might want to challenge yourself appropriately is in the science or in the math area. Hopefully that's something, if you're interested in STEM, that's more interesting to you anyway. And it's going to help you kind of set that foundation for your career, not just to get into college, kind of challenging yourself in those components. Now, that may vary a little bit. If you're looking at more selective institutions, you may want to reach out and ask if they have recommendations for classes that you should be taking. But ultimately, there's no magic number for any school that's going to say you need 5 AP classes and 2 honors classes or anything like that. It's really about challenging yourself appropriately, working with your counseling office and your family, and finding success in those classes. If anyone else wants to chime in or has a different opinion, feel free.
Sounds good, okay. How about the essay questions on the application? What are you looking for? How are the essays and supplements used? Could you tell if a student had a lot of help on their essay? And does it matter if they did have help? So any comments on that?
I'll jump in on this one. So the essay, of course, all of us are going to look pretty closely at that essay for a few different reasons. One, it's the best possible lens we get into how you choose to present yourself and project yourself as not just a student, but as an individual, both in terms of the style of your writing and the subject matter that you choose. And so we take a careful look at that component of the writing. And of course, quality of writing. I mean, it's the best mechanism to get a sense. All of us have writing-intensive curriculums. No matter what your major is, you're going to need to know how to write both in college and beyond, right? And so that's something that we take very seriously. And yeah, we kind of expect those essays to be well polished. And so I think does it matter if you got help question is interesting, because we do expect to see a lot of intention and thought and editing and review in those essays. And I think one of the biggest red flags that many of us see on applications is when you do see a lot of errors and typos. Not that indicates you're a bad student, but maybe you didn't take that application very seriously, right? And so it gives us a lot of different things that we can consider, both academically and otherwise, that don't come out in other places in the application necessarily. And I'll tack on, we look at the writing in your entire application. The essay is not the only place that we're evaluating your writing. So, reread everything that you submit, because it's always a little, when you, again, ask, how much support did they get, or support did they get when you see a really great killer essay, and then the descriptions of co-curriculars or other supplemental materials or scholarship question, whatever it happens to be, when those are a little bit weaker, that might indicate something, right, about the nature of the application. So anytime you're writing words on your application, know that we're taking that seriously, in addition to your standard essay.
I would say it's also okay to use language that you would actually use. So I remember reading applications. So you read from, let's say, December to March, unless you're rolling, you read a little bit longer. But let's say you read 3 months a year intensively. So for 9 months a year, I would rarely hear the word plethora, and almost never hear the word myriad. And then for 3 months a year, no one could say it was a lot. It was always a plethora. And eventually you lose your voice when you try to get too special, if you want to look at it that way. Leave your thesaurus button alone. You don't need it. for this most of the time.
Wise words, yes. Okay, so how about SAT and ACT scores? I heard someone mention if they were test optional. So if you could sort of describe the focus on SAT, ACT, what direction the school's going. What if I'm a good student, but I just don't test well? Those types of things.
I can jump in on this one too. Yeah. Okay, well, yeah. So a few of us up here are test optional, and that's something that is a growing population of schools across the country, which is really exciting for those of us that do feel that it's an important thing to consider. We've been test optional now for this is our 5th year being test optional, and found those test scores are one of the weakest indicators of preparedness for college of anything that we can quantify and everything that we consider, right? Your in-class performance is a much better indicator. Very often your writing quality even is something that can be a more predictive thing than your test scores, right? So giving students that option to be test optional. Now, there are as many different nuances to test optional policies as there are colleges that are test optional, right? So definitely work individually with those schools if that is a path that you want to consider. Know that we're giving you the benefit of the doubt if you do apply test optional, and we're not assuming it's because you're embarrassed by your test scores, right? We're just giving you that space to maybe apply through different means. Many colleges will not consider you for merit-based aid if you apply test optional. Always an important thing to ask about. But yeah, definitely it's a great path that we're seeing a lot more students pursue. At this point, close to a third of our applicants apply test optional. I think that's pretty typical. And so that's been an exciting trend across the board. And so, yeah.
Yeah, this is our first year going test optional, and I think the biggest question that I run into from a lot of families is, when do you know to apply test optional, and when do you know to submit test scores? So usually my advice, and if anybody else has anything different, feel free to say, but my advice is usually look at the average for each school that you're looking at. If you are at the average or above, I generally tell students and encourage them, go ahead and submit your test scores. If you're below that, go ahead and apply test optional. And like Miles said, we're not going to look at you and automatically assume that's low. We're just going to weigh your GPA a little more. But it's okay to apply test optional, and it's okay to send your test scores too if you feel more comfortable with it.
Gonzaga is not test optional, so we do need your SAT or ACT scores. And we do this so that for us, it's a way for us to put every applicant from all these different schools that we get applications from on some sort of one standard is what we're using. With that said, how much emphasis is put on it? There are averages published on our website, but that's not what we're hoping that students are at. There is that middle 50% range, and that's the number that I typically give out to families, because if your GPA is really high, and like what Miles said, there is research that GPA actually is a better indicator of how students perform in colleges than the SAT or ACT is. What we do is we actually use that to dig a little deeper. So if you're interested in engineering, we'll use the section called Passport to Advanced Math to take a look at your strength in math ability. So we dissect the SAT and ACT a little bit more. With that said, we'll super score it. So we are trying our best to make sure you're getting that composite score up.
All right. How about a word on letters of recommendation? So should these come from academic core teachers or from an elective teacher like your band teacher who's known you for 4 years, or an art teacher? What about if I have a job? Should I have my boss write a letter of recommendation? What do you recommend?
I'm happy to take this one. Most of us are in the throes of reading applications right now. And that involves opening every single document that you send to us and reading it. If we're asking for 2 letters of recommendation, we would love to see 2 letters of recommendation. We sometimes get 4, 5, 6. That can make the reading process start to become tedious. We also sometimes get letters of recommendation from parents, so generally unnecessary.
I would say yes, it is unnecessary.
There might be a school out there that asks for them. We are not it. So I would say, to get back to the heart of the question, which is who should you be asking to write your letter of recommendation? I would say yes, having it come from a core teacher is great. We would love it to be somebody who can speak to your in-class performance and experience. So are you a leader in class? Are you quiet in class? Are you prepared? Are you paying attention? Has there been growth? Somebody who can speak to that type of in-class behavior is really helpful for us. We do often, particularly I think at institutions that are of the competitiveness that you see on this panel, get additional letters from bosses, band leaders, politicians. Kerry Washington, she's an alumna every once in a while. Not really going to be shoring up your application unless that person's name is on one of our buildings, likely. That can depend a little bit from school to school, but I would say the general rule of thumb is that the institution has determined how many letters of application they would like. Generally, it's at least one from your counselor and at least one from a teacher. That is what you should provide.
Can you speak to how diversity is valued in the applicant pool when you're looking at admissions process?
I can talk about that one a little bit. Sure. For us, especially for a lot of schools, you're going to see a lot of schools wanting to be a place that reflects the diversity of students around them. It's definitely something that a lot of schools like us, we are trying to be, looking at students from all different backgrounds and wanting to represent as many students as possible. For honestly, it's a bit of a tricky way the question is worded. That diversity valued in the applicant pool, we're still looking for students that are going to succeed in college, but for us, it's something we strive to have represented at our school too. So it's one of those things where, as far as an admissions process goes, I don't know if I'd be comfortable saying that. Like, diversity is something that we'll look for specifically over any other levels of academic preparedness, if that's a fair way to say that. But you're seeing a lot of different alternative pathways to recognizing students that come from underrepresented backgrounds and making sure they're supported in the system as well, and recognizing some of the barriers that they've had to face even in approaching higher education too. So as far as like valued in the admissions process, it's, I don't know if anybody else has a better answer than that, but I'd say a lot of schools are wanting to reflect the population as well, to be representative of the world that we live in too. But it's when we talk a lot about holistic review, and it's one of those things that when we look at your entirety of the student, if we see a student who's coming from an underrepresented background, from a low-income high school, doesn't have a lot of opportunities, some schools don't have the AP Running Start options, those are things we do take into account too, if they don't have the lack of opportunities, kind of the way I'd say that too. I don't know if anybody else has anything on that.
I think it's helpful to also recognize why you're asking the question. It's not so much just about faces of color, but it's also experience, and how do you define diversity? For some families, I would ask, how do you define diversity? And for them, it was very specific. They wanted to know if you had black students. And for other families, it was more about, did you have more underrepresented students in general? Or did you have socioeconomic diversity? For somebody who is really interested in how they're going to be comfortable as a person who's LGBTQI, that may mean what they mean by diversity. So just keep that in mind as you hear conversations about diversity. How are you defining it, and how is the school defining it? Because we're not always comfortable talking about it. You notice we all kind of looked at each other and said, who's going to take it first? Not because nobody cares, but because everybody wants to figure out how to talk about it well. So just think about how you think about it, and then recognize that those are the answers you're looking for, and they may or may not be the answers the colleges are giving you right off the bat, too.
Thank you. How about early applications or early decision? Is it an advantage to applying for early decision? Or what kind of student should go through this process versus not? I don't know that much about it, so you guys take it away.
We know a little.
Yeah, so since we have all three, I guess, kind of major types of applications, I can speak to that. So early decision, how many of us have EDs? Okay. Early decision being that kind of binding relationship that you can set up with your application, right? Where you sign a contract alongside your family and your counselor saying, if I am admitted to this university, I agree to enroll, pending, financial, circumstances lining up, right? We want to make sure that we give you that out. But beyond that, yes, you're saying this college is far and above my top choice, and I will be there in the fall should you admit me. That's frequently used with athletes. That's a pretty common pathway that you see students coming in with ED. And certain colleges have different policies surrounding how they treat the admission process surrounding those students, and that's something you'll have to work with every single college individually. We don't really treat any kind of admission criteria differently in our own ED process, nor EA nor regular. EA being early action, which is the next type of application. Totally normal application that comes in a little bit earlier in the year, right? So you just hear back a few months earlier. Again, doesn't impact anything about how we look at that application. Now we do admit at a higher rate out of that pool, but that's more of a correlation than a causation, just because students that are submitting their applications earlier just tend to have it together a little bit better, right? And are just submitting in November, frankly. That's why we see that. And then of course have that regular decision option, totally normal application that comes along later in the year. And so again, this is radically different than every college. That happens to be how Puget Sound does things. But we do have those three distinct kinds, those two non-binding options, and that one binding early decision option earlier in the year.
I'll say part of the reason I would recommend doing a lot of homework ahead of the process, which you're here, so you're already doing that, is to have a really tight list of colleges that you're interested in, because those kind of things can get really confusing from school to school. And I want to apologize on behalf of the entire college admissions community for naming them early action and early decision, because they sound really similar and like they're the same thing, but they're actually very different. And so really starting those conversations with the schools that you're applying and asking those questions, you're going to reach people like us who our job is to help you through this process. So if you get all confused, definitely reach out to the schools you're applying to.
And I would say early decision, kind of getting back to the question of is one better than the other or have a higher admit rate than the other. Early decision, when you hit submit on your application, you're saying yes to us. So you're a slam dunk. So typically universities' admit rates from students who are applying early decision are very high, because you are coming to my school if I admit you. So there's no like, you've applied to 15 schools, I'm not sure, I might have to court you a little bit, like I don't know. I know you're coming. If I admit you, you're coming, barring any financial like scuffles. But that's, so if you're very sure of a school, then ED can be a great way to go. You're done with the process and delightful.
The only caveat, and I agree completely, the only caveat I would say is, if you need to see all the financial aid packages
Yes.
to make a decision, then ED is not for you. Don't play the system, what you perceive as playing the system or beating the system by saying, well, I'll apply ED, if financial aid is a big piece of the conversation in your family. Because when you apply ED, you get to see one financial aid package. I mean, I know this has shifted a little bit because they can apply for aid earlier, but you really get to see one package, and you have to decide that that package works, or that's done for that particular institution in a lot of cases. Some places will let you go back to the regular pool, some places will not. Once you apply ED, it's over. And so it's really important, I think, to think about it in the commitment sense. The way I always look at it is if you apply ED, you're sort of engaged. So you don't get engaged to more than one person. Look, you shouldn't get engaged to more than one person. It's really not very nice to be engaged to more than one person. Let's go that way. You're really saying like I'm sorry.
Andrea.
Andrea said, Andrea? Yes. Said, you're saying I'll come if I can make it work financially. So you want to make sure that you've really committed to the right one. You don't want to go, the sentence that I struggle with is I'm going to apply ED somewhere. It's like saying I'm going to marry someone. You're not really being that thoughtful about it. You're just saying I'm going to marry someone. So I think if you can think about that commitment piece, I think it matters a lot.
Thank you. We have just like 7 minutes left, so I want to see if we have any questions from the audience. Any hands? Go ahead.
I have a question, like how much do athletics or extracurriculars play in, like when I applied to college, it was sort of like you applied, but you didn't reach out necessarily to coaches or anything, if it was like, say, a smaller private with a large school, Division III. But now I'm understanding even like with Division III, you should contact the coaches. So I'm just wondering like how that plays into it.
So are you talking about like a recruited athlete kind of situation?
Well,
or
yeah,
just,
I didn't realize, like,
extracurricular?
I think Division I did that, but I didn't realize like Division III and other schools did that.
I think it's probably going to depend quite a bit on the competitive level of the university. So you're correct, Division I often, especially for programs like basketball, they're going to be recruiting. I mean, if you haven't been looked at by your freshman year of high school, you might not be on the roster for Gonzaga. But however, other D3 schools, even among Division III, there's going to be a lot of different levels of. So I think that if a student is interested in athletics at a particular institution, or really at a school, just reaching out and asking those questions, and also using the resources through your college counseling office, because they'll have quite a few of kind of the different NCAA clearinghouse and things like that. I guess it doesn't. So Seattle uses a Division I school, so that recruitment process is very efficient. I don't know if any of our D2 or D3 folks.
So PLU use D3 also with UPS, we're in the same conference, and D3 general rule is, yeah, go ahead and reach out early because it is a recruitment process, but there's also a walk-on process too. So let's say your student's kind of borderline unsure if they want to follow through with it, they can also try out for the D3 early on in the walk-on process and see. But the nice thing about D3 is that there's no like scholarship tied to it. So let's say your student runs track for their first year, they tear their ACL, they can't run anymore, right? So there's no worry about like, am I going to be able to afford school anymore because I'm no longer running? So yeah, that's the nice thing about D3. Good job.
Okay, question here.
So I'm wondering about AP classes. Would it hurt your application if you show all the grades you got in the AP classes, but not report your test scores? Do you look at AP test scores, or does that come later when kids are trying to get credit for those classes? Would it be weird to see an application that shows a bunch of AP classes, but not the test scores? Okay.
Not at all. Yeah, well, of course, needs the scores for transferring credit potentially if there's a policy surrounding that, but no, we're much more interested in the in-class grades, in-class performance.
Any other questions? Over here?
I'm just wondering, what do you guys think about like pushing beyond the normal like requirements, like taking a third or fourth year of world language? Like, how do you guys view that kind of thing? View that on your applications?
Particularly if that's what you want to do, right? And if if you are taking 3-4 years of foreign language and you want to do international studies or that kind of language in college, then yeah, absolutely, that's something we'd love to see because you're showing intentionality right off the bat. As long as you're, keeping up your other core curriculum classes and not nudging out other things and taking all like foreign language and music classes, right? As long as you're still doing your core stuff. But yeah, no, it's great to see.
How much weight do you guys put on recommendations from counselors versus recommendations from teachers and coaches?
So, for us, it's not necessarily weight, but when I review letters of recommendation, I love the opportunity to get to know a student from a teacher or a counselor's lens. Particularly, let's say you struggled in, an AP bio class, right? But you put in that extra effort to earn that B or whatever grade you earned. Reading letters of recommendations from those teachers, for me, is more impactful because it allows me to know the kind of student that you are and that extra effort you put in to earn that letter grade.
There are some schools that have very, very high student-to-counselor ratios. And so if we have a student who comes from a school that their counselor has 550 students, they're not going to be able to write letters of recommendation for everyone. We totally understand that, and we will accept an additional teacher recommendation in the place of that counselor recommendation.
And more often than not, your counselor is already prepared to put a statement that says, I will not be submitting a recommendation for this student, and that's not looked on negatively. We can see right there exactly what the ratio is, and so it's very obvious to us that, like, clearly they can't. They're just trying to keep it together.
If your counselor letter says I cannot write a letter for the student because they asked me the day before this was due, that's different. Your counselor in that situation.
There was a question here.
Okay. I have a question about kids who are just planning their high school curriculum. There's what, I'm not sure if this is a myth, but there's a thought out there that says take the most rigorous program your high school offers. What if your high school offers IB and that's not your jam? Do parents and kids need to worry about that when they're like freshmen and planning that high school curriculum? How is it going to look? Hey, you know, in 4 years you're going to be, or 3 years you're going to be applying to college, and they're going to know you came from a school with IB, but you didn't do the IB. Does that look bad? Or?
I would say like it's one of those things, does it look good to have IB credit on there? Yeah, totally, it does look good. Does it look bad to not have IB? No. What else are they doing? Are they involved? Are they still doing leadership? Are they doing community service? Are they clubs, activities? Like, are they keeping good grades in their normal classes too? I think if we get this question all the time, is like, how much AP running start IB should you get? And we look at the transcripts, so we always see when it's that first time they're trying these classes and it's maybe didn't go so well, and we see that on the transcript when they're full of running start or IB stuff and it just tanked the GPA too. So I do normally tell my students, like, don't just dive in towards the hardest thing you can and just hope that it'll look okay, because
this is the end of session 1. Please proceed to your next question.
Can I add something? I think it also depends on which school your student's looking at. So let's look at, is it a very, very selective school? In that case, that university might be looking at that sort of thing. So that's.
And I think the root of your question is, you hear that method, take the best classes available at that school. That's much more relevant, I think, more often on the other end, where you're at a school that doesn't offer those things. Are we going to punish those kids because they didn't have the opportunity to take AP? No, of course not. Or IB or whatever happens to be. More often that's the conversation than, well, they didn't take 17 IB classes, so clearly they're not ready for college. That's good. More often.
Thank you very much.